Eunice McElroy was a very promising young woman in spite of the difficult life she had led. And when she sought out an abortion from a doctor, she probably expected, as any woman would, that a doctor would perform the abortion safely. Eunice was tragically wrong. This is November 14th, and I'm Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. On November 14th of 1928, a 21-year-old woman named Eunice died in Chicago from complications of a criminal abortion. She was a very promising young woman, even though she'd had a difficult child. Her parents had divorced when she was very young, and she and her sister were sent to live with their maternal grandmother. Now, the sister's name is sometimes given as Julia and sometimes Jewel. I don't know which one, Jewel or Julia, was a nickname. But 8 years after the divorce, the girl's mother went to court trying to regain custody, and the two girls tearfully begged the judge not to send them back to their mother. Eunice, who was 12 at the time, told the judge that the mother had threatened to place the girls, quote, in a home without windows where we would have to scrub floors all our life. And she said that both she and Jewel were afraid of their mother. So the judge allowed them to stay with their grandmother. And both young ladies became very successful high school students. They were very actively involved in a lot of clubs, and the two of them sang duets together, both at school performances and at performances in the community that sometimes I would see in the papers when I Googled them. So this was a young lady that had a beautiful life ahead of her. Now, after graduation, Jewel or Julia became a cabaret singer, so she used their musical education, but Eunice decided to use the business education she'd gotten in high school, and she became a stenographer. Now, Dr. Thomas Ney was indicted by a grand jury for felony murder in Eunice's death. And among the witnesses was Julia, who said that she had heard Ney tell Eunice that if she was ever questioned about the abortion, she was supposed to say that this Dr. So-and-so had done the abortion. Well, it did an investigation, and Dr. So-and-so had been dead for 6 months. Now, Ney was able to get the trial delayed for over 2 years, obtaining more than 25 continuances. And this reminds me of the case of Deanna Bell in Chicago, who was 13 years old and went to a Family Planning Associates medical group member clinic for an abortion. They massively overdosed her with Brevitol. And if you're to believe the medical records that they documented that wound up in court, it looked like they stood around with their thumbs up their butts while the life ebbed out of this girl. They dragged the case out in court for 15 years. And that was enough probably to wear down the family. You lose the witnesses, they won the case. It was in court longer than that poor girl was alive. But at any rate, Ney was able to delay the trial for over 3 years, and he was still out on bail pending trial when he was implicated in the abortion death of an 18-year-old waitress who died in 1931. Now, this seemed to be the last straw. His bail was revoked, and the medical board took a closer look at him and started to wonder if he'd ever even been licensed after he graduated from medical school. I haven't been able to find out yet what they discovered about his legitimacy of having been licensed in the first place. They probably did yank his license. Now, the case ran into another delay because the courts were unable to locate Julia. Relatives said that they think people had pressured her to make herself scarce. If you read some pro-choice sources, they talk about how because the two girls shared a bedroom, possibly a bed, which was common at the time, they asked a lot of questions about Eunice's menstrual cycle. When did she stop menstruating? Was her period regular? And the theory is that it could be she just did not want to talk about this stuff in public on the stand. That's a possibility as well. And further investigation led to allegations that Ney had poisoned some women that he'd injured so that they'd not be able to make statements against him. But one of the people making that claim was Eunice's mother, Bessie. She said that when a patient got blood poisoning, Ney would send an attendant for a prescription of mild sedatives, and then while the attendant was out of the room, inject something into the patient that would leave her in pain still, but unable to speak. Those allegations came to nothing that I can determine. And I think Jay would have acted on that. So I'm not sure whether that tells us something about Eunice's mother or whether that tells us something about Dr. Ney. So Ney was convicted of murder for Alma's death. I haven't been able to determine if he was also convicted of murder in Eunice's death.